You know, you probably think your ability to anticipate the future is like your absolute greatest intellectual asset. I mean, we all do,
Oh,
right?
totally. We treat it like the ultimate survival skill.
Exactly. But what if your obsession with being prepared is the exact thing making you completely blind to reality?
That is the big question. It really flips everything we're taught upside down.
It really does. So, have you ever spent an entire morning perfectly choreographing how a difficult conversation was going to go? Like you're in the shower or you're driving your commute and you're just playing out this whole script in your head.
Oh, yeah. You know exactly what objection your boss is going to raise.
Right. You have your flawless counter argument chambered, and you have essentially checkmated the entire room before you even touch the doorknob.
But then you actually sit down at the conference table.
Yes, the conversation starts, and within 30 seconds, the entire master plan just vaporizes. Somebody asks a question you didn't model, or, the tone in the room is just completely different than the one you imagined.
And suddenly you are just completely unmoored.
Exactly. It's a wildly disorienting experience.
It really is, and almost everyone goes through it. But
Yeah.
the most revealing part of that moment isn't actually the failure of the prediction itself. It's the emotional reaction we have to that failure.
Oh, the emotional reaction is the worst part.
Right. Because we don't feel curious about the new information. We feel, well, almost offended.
We feel betrayed by reality for not following our script, like the room has somehow breached a contract we wrote in our own heads.
Yes, exactly.
Well, welcome to today's deep dive. We are unpacking a really profound and highly counterintuitive concept today. The idea that treating prediction as the pinnacle of human intelligence is actually a foundational error.
It's essentially a cognitive trap.
Right. It leaves us vastly less equipped to navigate our lives than if we hadn't tried to anticipate the future at all. We treat prediction as the crown jewel of our minds.
We really do condition ourselves to view it as the ultimate evolutionary edge.
Okay, let's unpack this because it feels so counterintuitive. We assume the organism that best models the future wins.
That is the prevailing assumption, yeah. But to understand why this backfires, we have to look under the hood at how our attention actually operates neurologically.
So, what's actually happening in our brains?
Well, our brains are basically these massive calorie-saving prediction machines, processing raw, novel sensory data in real time. That takes an immense amount of metabolic energy.
It's exhausting.
It is. So to save those calories, the brain prefers to just run a pre-existing script. It projects a top-down model of what it expects to encounter.
And ideally, it only wants to process the tiny prediction errors, right?
Right, the anomalies. Running the simulation is literally just our brain being energy efficient.
Which, I mean, that makes sense on a biological level. If I know a door is heavy, I don't need to reevaluate the physics of the door every single time I open it. I just predict the weight and push.
Exactly, that's a helpful model.
Mhm.
But when we apply that exact same mechanical efficiency to complex human interactions,
Or volatile environments.
right, we make this massive trade-off. We substitute a living encounter for a static mental model.
So when you walk into that meeting clinging to your rehearsed talking points, you're not actually in the room with your colleagues.
Not at all. You are in a closed loop with your own expectations. You are interacting with a ghost ship.
Oh, wow, a ghost ship. That is such a vivid way to put it.
Because the prediction has become your primary reality. The actual living event unfolding right in front of you is relegated to this secondary status.
So you're only processing the physical world insofar as it confirms or disrupts that internal shower simulation you ran.
Exactly. And because our brains are heavily invested in protecting the calories we spent building that simulation, a disruption isn't treated as helpful new data.
It's treated as an assault on our cognitive architecture.
Yes, it's an attack.
That perfectly explains that feeling of betrayal. The world failed to behave according to the forecast, and rather than adjusting, we demand to know why the weather didn't check our itinerary.
Which leads to that concept of perceptual closure.
Right, there's this fascinating metaphor from the source material about how this isolates us. We end up constructing this psychological snow globe. We seal ourselves inside, shake it up, and completely mistake the little plastic flakes falling around us for the actual climate.
It's a beautiful, terrifying image.
But, I find myself struggling with the practical application of this, especially regarding professional expertise.
How so?
Well, if I've spent 2 decades working in a highly specialized industry, gathering all this historical data and pattern recognition, shouldn't a rigorous predictive model make me significantly more perceptive?
You'd think so, right?
Yeah, I would assume that level of accumulated knowledge cures naivety.
What's fascinating here is that it actually forces us to reconsider what naivety actually is.
Wait, really? How do you mean?
Well, we typically define naivety as a deficit, right? Like a lack of information or worldliness. You just don't have enough data points to read a situation accurately.
Right, just being green.
But there is a totally different, far more insidious category of blindness. It's what the text calls a sophisticated naivety.
Sophisticated naivety.
Yeah, it doesn't arrive through ignorance. It arrives through the heavy accumulation of knowledge.
Oh, okay, like an autonomous self-driving car that is so incredibly confident in its highly detailed but slightly outdated GPS map that it just drives straight off a bridge into a newly formed sinkhole.
That is a perfect encapsulation.
Yes, it has gigabytes of data telling it the road is there, which makes it totally blind to the water rushing over the windshield.
Exactly. The naivety of the autonomous car isn't a lack of programming. It's an over-reliance on the model at the expense of its real-time sensors.
Wow.
Sophisticated naivety describes a person whose internal model has become so elaborate and structurally confident that it literally acts as an impenetrable filter against reality.
The model becomes more authoritative to them than the physical world itself.
Right. Because prediction feels productive. It gives you this huge dopamine hit of agency.
It gives you the sensation of being ahead of the curve.
Exactly. You have this continuous internal feed running, and because that feed makes you feel secure and intelligent, it consistently wins the competition for your attention over the messy, unpredictable sensory reality.
So my 20 years of experience could very well be the mechanism that blinds me. Simply because I've seen a scenario play out 99 times, and I am absolutely certain I know how the 100th story ends.
You've stopped looking at the road and started just staring at the map.
Man, that's wild. But what happens when the car does hit the water?
What do you mean?
If these mental models are robust enough to actively block out sensory reality, how does a person in the grip of sophisticated naivety react when they are objectively, undeniably proven wrong?
They enter what is known as a sealed epistemology.
A sealed epistemology, what does that look like?
It's essentially a psychological fortress. The very mechanisms that would normally allow a human being to correct a mistake are hijacked by the model itself to ensure its own survival.
So the model protects itself.
Yes. When you're deeply emotionally invested in a prediction, your perception undergoes a subtle distortion. You begin to cherry pick.
You only register the environmental details that validate your forecast.
Exactly, and your brain actively discards or minimizes anything that contradicts it.
But when a contradiction is just too massive to ignore, like when the event is utterly inexplicable under the current model?
Well, we don't sit down and revise the blueprint. We treat the anomaly as a malfunction of reality.
A malfunction of reality. We treat it as an illegitimate data point.
Right. The event is framed as a fluke, a glitch, or just someone else's irrationality.
The weather is wrong, not the map.
Exactly. The tragedy of a sealed epistemology is that open, perceptual contact with the present moment is the only instrument capable of revealing the discrepancy between your model and the world.
But that contact has been systematically shut down.
Completely. The capacity to recognize an error is replaced by the activity of being wrong more elaborate.
Being wrong more elaborately.
Yes, you can tort the failure into a narrative that miraculously still proves your initial premise was correct all along.
Oh my gosh, I think every single listener can immediately picture a specific coworker or manager right now.
Oh, without a doubt.
The person who is immensely confident in their quarterly projections, whose predictions consistently fail to materialize in the real world, but who never experiences a single moment of self-doubt.
They always have an incredibly articulate explanation that protects their ego.
Yes. They'll say, my model was flawless, the consumer just behaved irrationally, or I was completely right about the macroeconomic trend, the timing was just distorted by an unprecedented anomaly.
They're hopelessly trapped inside that sealed epistemology.
And the worst part is, corporate and social environments heavily reward that exact behavior, which just reinforces the trap.
It's so true. The individual in the room who speaks with the most absolute certainty about what will happen next is almost universally anointed as the most capable leader.
Because ambiguity makes us incredibly anxious. We flock to the illusion of certainty.
Exactly. But the individual projecting that unwavering confidence is often the most deeply disconnected person in the room.
Because their confidence is calibrated entirely to their own internal simulation, not to the living environment, We promote the person staring most intensely at the GPS, even as the water is rising around the tires.
It's a dangerous dynamic.
It really is.
Hey, folks.
So if our cognitive predictions are this compromised, and if this sophisticated naivety actively severs our connection to the world, what are we supposed to rely on?
Well, this is the crux of it. What replaces the predictive model?
Right, because we are constantly navigating environments that require rapid assessment. Here's where it gets really interesting. The text brings up somatic intelligence.
Yes. The shift involves moving our center of gravity away from the predictive, cognitive mind and dropping into that somatic intelligence.
Animal in the room.
Exactly. We tend to conceptualize ourselves as brains driving around in meat suits.
Meat suits, that's so accurate, though.
But the biological hardware of the human body possesses an astonishing processing capacity that operates entirely outside of cognitive forecasting.
The body does not predict. The body responds.
Yes, it is explicitly engineered for the real-time, instantaneous processing of an ever-shifting environment.
And that animal is taking in vastly more data than the cognitive mind could ever consciously tabulate.
Oh, infinitely more.
It's like that gut feeling you get when someone sits across from you and enthusiastically says they are thrilled to collaborate with you, but their physical presence just screams hostility.
Exactly. Your cognitive mind might predict a smooth project because you logically heard the word thrilled.
But your somatic intelligence is reading the microtension in their jaw, the rigid posture, the slightly delayed eye contact. It knows immediately that the environment is unsafe.
Because below the threshold of conscious awareness, the nervous system is this incredible integration engine.
It's registering thousands of subtle environmental signals simultaneously.
And synthesizing them into an immediate visceral understanding of the present moment. The somatic field grasps the reality of a situation long before the narrative mind has time to catch up.
But the major obstacle is that the predictive mind is running a relentless, deafening, pre-recorded broadcast.
Right, it drowns it out.
That dense, noisy weather of our own forecasts, what we're going to say next, what they're going to say, how we'll counter it, it just consumes all of our available bandwidth.
It drowns out the highly sensitive, low-frequency signal of the body's intelligence. We essentially become functionally deaf to our own nervous systems.
And you can physically observe this override happening in real time, can't you?
Oh, absolutely. When you interact with someone who is heavily invested in a cognitive prediction, there's a very distinct physiological signature.
Like a held breath quality to that presence.
Yes, a rigidity in the chest and shoulders.
Because they are bracing. You hold your breath when you are expecting an impact.
Exactly. And you can feel the hollowness in the conversation when you're talking to someone in that state.
Their attention is physically pitched slightly ahead of where the interaction actually is. They are reaching into a future moment that hasn't arrived yet.
Which means they aren't actually listening to the words coming out of your mouth.
They're scanning your speech, waiting to catch a specific keyword or signal that confirms the scenario they've already decided is true.
Right. They are skilled enough to grab just enough incoming data to construct a plausible mask of active listening, but the actual organic connection is dead.
It's totally non-organic because it attempts to force a closed system onto an open reality.
And the living world is genuinely, fundamentally open. It's constantly generating novelty.
Moving in directions that cannot be fully anticipated simply because the underlying conditions are always changing.
So when you impose a rigid, preloaded predictive frame onto an open system, you are basically engaging with a fiction and demanding the world treat it as truth.
Which is madness. But, this desire to peer around the corner of time isn't just some modern phenomenon born of corporate strategy or algorithmic forecasting.
No, human beings have always been desperate to know what comes next.
But it's revealing to look at how ancient cultures managed this terror of the unknown. If we look back at sacred traditions, specifically the concept of the oracle, they approached this entirely differently.
They really did.
Our modern translation of these traditions has flattened their meaning. We assume oracles were just ancient fortune tellers predicting the future. But according to the text, oracles didn't predict, they read.
And the distinction between predicting and reading is an absolute chasm in how the human nervous system is utilized.
How so? Break that down for us.
Well, prediction is fundamentally a past tense activity.
Past tense.
Yes, you are mining historical data, assembling those old parts into a probable future architecture within your mind, and labeling that assembly foresight.
It's an act of construction based on what has already happened.
Exactly. Reading, conversely, is entirely present tense. Reading does not assemble anything. It receives.
Wait, I want to pause and translate the mechanics of this because it sounds almost mystical, but it's deeply physiological. When we say an oracle received the present, we're talking about genuine structural availability in the nervous system.
Yes, very literally.
Are we basically saying that reading requires you to unclench your jaw, soften your focus, and actually look at the person in front of you without an agenda?
That is exactly the physical manifestation of it.
It is the literal, physical act of being open enough to register what is actively happening.
You cannot receive the energetic signature or the subtle movements of an unfolding event if your sensory channels are completely jammed by a frantic rehearsal of what you expect it to happen.
You're just too full of noise.
Right. To read a room, to read a person, or to read a volatile situation requires you to prioritize contact over modeling.
Wow. So the remedy for the prediction trap isn't better data collection.
Not at all.
It's not upgrading our scenario planning software or building a more complex algorithm to account for edge cases. The only way out of the trap is unmediated contact.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you have to be willing to do something that is, frankly, terrifying for the human ego.
Which is what?
You have to release the prediction mid-flight. You have to voluntarily let the map dissolve so you can actually look at the territory.
Surrender the shield.
Yes, because prediction offers a profound psychological comfort. It promises a version of control that the genuine present simply does not provide.
If you believe you know what is coming, you can arrange yourself defensively. You can brace for the impact.
But the immediate present is always vastly larger and more complex than any map we can draw of it.
It always contains pressures, nuances, and dimensions that no model could possibly account for.
Exactly. And stepping out from behind that predictive shield to actually live in that overwhelming excess, that requires an extraordinary tolerance for vulnerability and uncertainty.
It requires an authenticity of presence that goes way beyond just performing openness. It isn't just telling yourself, oh, I am okay with being surprised today.
No, it is a fundamental shift in how you allocate your attention.
So, what does this all mean? When we pull all these threads together, the ultimate revelation about our forecasting minds is that genuine intelligence is, and always has been, responsive rather than anticipatory.
We have spent generations confusing foresight with modeling.
Totally.
When we look at ecological systems, the most capable organisms, the ones that successfully navigate extreme volatility and thrive, are rarely the ones with the most elaborate internal models of the future.
They are the organisms with the most available, highly sensitive nervous systems.
Right. They possess the capacity to be entirely present with the exact reality that is arriving in this specific fraction of a second.
Without the static interference of what they decided yesterday was supposed to arrive today.
Exactly. They respond dynamically to reality rather than reacting to the friction of their expectations colliding with reality.
Which brings me directly to you, the listener. The next time you find your heart rate elevating over an upcoming event, whether it's pitching a new client, having a difficult conversation with a partner, or stepping into a performance review,
and you feel that familiar urge to start endlessly rehearsing the script in your head.
yes, I challenge you to try a radical experiment. Consciously drop the map. Stop rehearsing the future. Walk through the door and commit entirely to paying attention to the unmediated present.
Just listen to the tonal shifts in their voice. Watch the micro-expressions on their face.
Notice your own breathing. Let your somatic intelligence process the room the way it evolved to. You might be stunned to discover just how much more capable, adaptable, and persuasive you are when you aren't burning all your cognitive energy fighting to protect a fictional script.
You transition from performing a rehearsed role to actually being a living participant in the room.
And that leads to a final, provocative thought I want to leave you with today. We are constantly sold the idea that prediction grants us mastery and control over our lives.
It's the big lie.
It really is, because if reality is fundamentally open, if the universe is an endless engine of novelty that will always exceed our prior models, then our desperate attempts to control the future through forecasting are the exact mechanism that guarantees we will be blindsided.
That's the tragic irony.
By trying to lock our lives into a predictable, manageable grid, we seal ourselves inside that tiny snow globe, entirely disconnected from the breathtaking, terrifying, and beautiful environment we are so desperately trying to master.
We miss the real weather.
So, are you willing to trade the comforting fiction of knowing what happens next for the uncomfortable, unpredictable truth of actually being alive in the present? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
Until next time, keep your eyes on the road, not the GPS.